Beneath the Jungle of Cozumel, Connecting the Crowns, Book 1, by Rob Netto, narration by the author. Prologue. I slowly moved through the low room for the third time in as many days. What was I missing? I overlaid my maps of Cueva Quebrada and Dos Coronas cave systems on Google Earth, and they indicated that the cave should connect in this area. The problem, besides being unable to find the connection, was that where I was in Cueva Quebrada was only 28 feet deep. The area in Dos Coronas was 34 feet deep. I could very well be swimming above Dos Coronas with only a foot-thick layer of rock separating us. If that was the case, it might as well have been 10 feet. There was no way to get through it, even if I did subscribe to the camp that thought destroying caves for exploration was acceptable, which I don't. Having two layers so close to each other wasn't normal for water-filled caves. There should be a connection, and it should be right in front of me. The room widened a bit, and I looked to the right. About 40 feet away, I noticed a drop in the floor. It looked to be about the size of a manhole, like you might see on the street, only without the cover. I was too far away to tell if it was an actual opening to a layer below, or if it was no more than an indentation in the rock, a bowl in the floor. I decided I would take a closer look on my way back. I pulled the line marker from the pigtail holder clipped to my harness and placed it on the guideline below me, line I had placed in this tunnel about 6 months earlier on a previous visit to Cozumel. I wanted to check the remaining 80 feet of tunnel before looking at other leads. The overlays were telling me the closest the two caves came to each other was near the end of this tunnel. I had already been to the end of the guideline 5 times and not found anything. Something was bothering me about it, though. Something kept telling me I was missing the connection. I continued following my line to the end of the tunnel, hoping to find whatever it was that was gnawing away at me, hoping to find something I had missed during previous visits to this area. It was easy to miss leads. The first time going through a new tunnel, you tended to be focused on the big stuff. You looked for the larger openings. You looked for what you thought would be going cave. Going cave is a phrase we use for cave passages that continue on, hopefully indefinitely. Sometimes you missed the real lead because you followed what looked like the obvious path. That path didn't always continue. Sometimes it just led you to a large room with no outlet, a dead end. You backtracked and found a small hole that looked like nothing more than a nook, but led to a much bigger tunnel than you were in. I remembered one such tunnel I explored. I initially followed the big passage, only to come to its termination a couple of 100 feet later in a large round room. I backtracked and saw a small window in the wall near the ceiling, the tannic layer of water bisecting it about midway, camouflaging it. I swam over to take a look. I slowly moved through the hole and found myself in a much larger room. The passage opened up and I ended up swimming several thousand more feet before turning around. It made no sense, but that was just how the earth cracked. The weak points gave way and created tunnels. The earth shifted and created fissures. The water flow carved out small rooms that went nowhere. I've encountered this on several occasions. That's why I never stopped looking. The connection to Dos Coronas had to be in the tunnel to which my maps kept bringing me back. I checked other tunnels in the area multiple times as well, but none of them went in the right direction. They all ended up curving away from Dos Coronas. I was visiting this tunnel for the 3rd time during the same trip. I was certain the connection was in that location. I kept coming back despite it not being an easy area to get to. It wasn't far from the nearest cenote, only about 1,100 feet. To non-divers, that might seem like quite some distance. Even to divers, considering that this was 1,100 feet in a water-filled cave. To an experienced diver with thousands of cave dives, 1,100 feet was a walk in the park. The path to get there wasn't so easy. Why would I be doing this? What was driving me to dive deep into a water-filled cave, far from any possibility of ascending to the surface, simply to find a connection to another cave? What could I possibly get in return for making this connection? One could ask the same question of countless explorers from history. Why would Jacques Cousteau dive repeatedly into the deep oceans of this earth, using what today we consider archaic and dangerous equipment? Why would Edmund Hillary attempt to reach the summit of Mount Everest after so many others had failed to reach it, many even dying in the process? Why would Neil Armstrong travel to the moon just so he could walk on it? I can't answer for those men, and I'm certainly not putting myself into the same class of explorer. All I can say is that I'm just a regular guy who likes to explore caves. I explore caves because they are there, and I appreciate their beauty and enjoy the process of exploration. I enjoy studying the maps I've made and trying to determine where the best area to continue exploration would be. I enjoy finding passages that have never been seen by another set of eyes. I enjoy the solitude of being in a location in this earth where no one else has ever been and likely will never go. Growing up, I used to love watching the original Star Trek. I loved the exploration of the galaxy and finding strange new worlds. Cave diving has allowed me to slip into that sci-fi fantasy and explore my own strange new worlds. Going into those tunnels provides me with an exhilaration I can't describe. There are simply no words that come close to describing the feeling of finding a place where no one has gone before and being the only person on this earth that's ever been in that location. There are many places, both in Cozumel and Florida, where I can lay that claim. Sure, I've had plenty of friends accompany me on my dives. I've also done a lot of solo exploration. Those of you that scuba dive might be thinking I'm crazy. We were taught in our very first training course to always dive with a buddy. It's safer to dive with someone else. That holds true in open water, where you can ascend directly to the surface. However, in a cave with small restrictions and silt that can obliterate the visibility, sometimes diving solo is safer. I don't see my claim to being the only person to have visited certain passages as a bragging right. I don't go around and tell everyone about these ventures. Very few people know about them. There's one particular cave in Florida that I've explored that only a handful of people know about. I've taken even less people to that cave and brought them to some of the passages I've found. No one else has been in more than half of the mile-plus length of tunnels that I've lined in that cave. It isn't likely anyone else will ever go there. It isn't an easy cave to get to, and it isn't an easy cave to dive. I don't tell others about these places because I don't want to reveal where they are. I don't want others to know where these places are because I've dedicated so much time and effort to accomplish what I have, and I'm not ready to let someone go in and scoop my leads. This is another common phrase in cave diving to describe when someone jumps in on someone else's exploration project without collaborating with them. They find the end of the line that was placed in the cave and continue to push the passage even farther in. The worst part is when they never tell the person who is still exploring the cave. I've had that happen to me. I also don't want someone going in there and damaging the cave. Not that every cave diver damages the caves they dive. Most are respectful of the environment and leave behind nothing but bubbles. But one only needs to look at the more popular underwater caves in Florida, Mexico, and France to see the impact divers with poor buoyancy control or no respect for the environment have left. So I keep a lot of information to myself to protect the caves and the passages that I've found. Now you may be wondering why I've written and published this book if that's the way I feel. Writing this book doesn't mean I feel any differently. I am still very protective of the places I have been. I don't reveal specific locations in the pages that follow. I don't provide any maps in their entirety of the caves I've explored. There's very little chance, if any at all, that anyone will ever be able to find the passages I've found and explored without devoting significant time and effort. I've been exploring the caves of Cozumel since 2011, and have spent hundreds of hours exploring, surveying, and mapping them. I know the caves intimately. It takes a lot of time, effort, and devotion to get to the point of familiarity that I've attained. Most people are looking for instant gratification. That rarely happens for very long in cave exploration. The reason for this book is because there are people who like to read about adventures like this that will never be able to do something even remotely similar. It takes a lot of training, dedication, and sacrifice to dive at this level. I moved across the country so I could live 10 minutes from some of the best cave diving in the United States. My career as a nurse made such a move possible. Not everyone has the time or resources for such endeavors. Not everyone has such a flexible career in terms of location. They might still enjoy reading about these adventures, though. I mentioned Pat Taylor in the foreword. He writes books about solo hiking and camping in remote wilderness. He spent several years camping in the Frank Church wilderness of Idaho during the winter months, sleeping in a tent in sub-freezing temperatures and becoming one with nature. As much as I'd like to do something similar, I know that a lifestyle like that is impossible for me at this stage of my life. So I live vicariously through Pat's books. I get to experience a little of what he did through the words he wrote. I only hope that there are readers who will live vicariously through the Beneath the Jungle of Cozumel and the Hidden Rivers of Florida series.